of Africa's resources. It was out with this slave trade and in with free trade. Accordingly, the Abolition of Slavery Act was passed in 1833, under which slavery was made illegal throughout the British Empire. The former slavers were not alone in remaking themselves. Realizing that the new elixir of reform would be difficult to sell in the old keg of Toryism, on 18th November 1830, Palmerston, the grand old Tory, took up his position in the Foreign Office as part of a Whig government. From there, he would move political boundaries across the globe as on a grand chessboard. So delicious in policy terms was the new plan for Britain post-slavery that in 1839, his new Whig party changed its name to the Liberal Party. The advent of the educated natives. The Association for Promoting the Discovery of the Interior Part of Africa, the African Association, was established in London on June 9, 1788, on the back of William Thornton's study. Sorry, give me a sec. Hang on. I've got something that I actually need to put up there. So I'm gonna take a short and quick break. It's just like a silent or quiet break, okay? So I'm not like doing this on the stream with you, right? Just give me a sec. We will then take on the advent of the educated natives. I hope you are following. Just one moment. Why is that taking forever then, right? Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, by the way. So if you are joining us, for some reason, maybe you stumbled on this, what we are reading is Nigeria, a fatherless people. How Nigeria and Nigerians missed the way or missed their road to the promised land. It says, the secret story of how the Nigerians missed the road to the promised land. It is a long read, and we are already an hour in. So let's continue. Everybody who is still listening. Mind you, let me know if, let me know if the audio is still perfect, as well as the image as well, okay? So that I'm not like just going on and on and on like that. I could listen, but it's just going to be a little bit of a distraction too, right? So thank you. And then I will say thank you to your Mitotu. So who donated the book to Mayego's Diary Politico. So we are thankful. Totu. A lot of you have actually read this book. So many of you have probably, you have the audio book as well. But something there is that we are all reading it together right now. You are seated there, or you are walking, or you have this earpiece plugged into your ears and all that. So yes, you are following it with your mind. Somehow, a lot of you are going to hear so many things as well, okay? That's going to question or put to question so many things you've believed all your life. That's why we are doing it together as well. Great job. Thank you. So let us continue. The advent of the educated natives. So the Association for Promoting the Discovery of the Interior Part of Africa, the African Association, was established in London on June 9, 1788, on the back of William Thornton's study of the American Colony Initiative in Liberia for liberated American slaves. It was this association that sent the famed explorers like Mungo Park and Hugh Clapperton into the African interior as pathfinders. The early work of these travelers had led to Sierra Leone being identified as the most benign place on the coast of the continent to establish the first British colony in West Africa. Initially, it was for the settlement of those American slaves who had fought on the British side in the American War of Independence and who were now to be found in significant numbers on the streets of London. Freetown, as the settlement was named, became the clearinghouse for the slaves recaptured by the Royal Navy in the course of the abolition. Here, they were assessed for their potential, with the less fortunate being shipped off to the Caribbean to work as slaves on the British plantations. The apparent contradiction was explained by the fact that slavery was, at this time, still legal. It was only the trade in slaves that was not. Some of these returnees would later be transplanted into Yoruba land to play a key role in the conversion to Christianity of the natives and the subsequent British takeover. Writing in 1837, Buxton states that 30 years prior, a few liberated African boys were sent to England and educated at the expense of the African Association with a view to their aid in working out the general objects of the association at Sierra Leone. This experiment informed Buxton's call for the education of the sons of Africa in their own country and by their own countrymen previously educated by Europeans. In the course of the slave trade, Africans had been deployed to capture other Africans to be taken to plantations in the Americas or Caribbean. Now, some of these former captives were to be deployed back to the West Coast of Africa to capture souls. And in one of their memoirs as well, they wrote, "We have already seen the desirableness of educating and civilizing the inhabitants of Africa. And a number of facts have been brought to light, tending to show that there is at least as great a readiness on their part to receive instruction as on ours to communicate it. The question now remains, who are to be the instructors? The climate is generally viewed as unfavorable to Europeans. And this being the case, I have great satisfaction in finding that from among the liberated Africans in our West Indian colonies, we are likely to be furnished with a number of persons in whom are united the desirable qualifications of fitness for the climate, competency to act as teachers, and willingness to enter upon the work." The mission for these recaptives was to convert to the way of Christ the people of their homeland, who they would have been told had sold them into slavery. The relationship between Christianity, slave owners, and the education of slaves up until this point is best described as ambivalent. It was memorably captured in the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, the American slave. Douglass wrote, "In August 1832, my master attended a Methodist camp meeting held in Bayside, Talbot County, and there experienced religion. I indulged a faint hope that his conversion would lead him to emancipate his slaves, and that if he did not do this, it would at any rate make him more kind and humane. I was disappointed in both these respects. It neither made him to be humane to his slaves, nor to emancipate them. If it had any effect on his character, it made him more cruel and hateful in all his ways. For I believe him to have been a much worse man after his conversion than before. Prior to his conversion, he relied upon his own depravity to shield and sustain him in his savage barbarity. But after his conversion, he found religious sanction and support for his slave-holding cruelty. He made the greatest pretensions to pity. His house was the house of prayer. He prayed morning, noon, and night. He very soon distinguished himself among his brethren and was soon made a class leader and exhorter. His activity in revivals was great, and he proved himself an instrument in the hands of the church in converting many souls. His house was the preacher's home. They used to take great pleasure in coming there to put up. For while he starved us, he starved them. While I lived with my master in St. Michael's, there was a white young man, a Mr. Wilson, who proposed to keep a Sabbath school for the instruction of such slaves as might be disposed to learn to read the New Testament. We met for 3 times when Mr. West and Mr. Fairbanks, both class leaders, with many others, came upon us with sticks and other missiles, drove us off, and forbade us to meet again. Thus ended our little Sabbath school in the pious town of St. Michael, wrote Frederick Douglass, the American slave. In the new climate of the drive towards colonization, if the former slaves were to be effectively deployed to evangelize to their people, they had to be educated. Their schooling center was Foray Bay College, Freetown, Sierra Leone. Their curriculum was the Bible. So, the flow of the river Niger. Before roads and railways, it was the rivers that served as the transportation highways into the various parts of the hinterland. The mighty river Niger was known. Only its precise course was a mystery which the African Association, working with the colonial office, resolved to get to the bottom of. The first explorer whom the African Association sent out in 1870 was Daniel Houghton, an Irish soldier. He died in the Sahara Desert. Mungo Park, a Scottish surgeon, came next. His first effort started on June 4th, 1795. He returned to try to find the mouth of the river Niger in 1805 and 1806. He was to die still trying. Hugh Clapperton, a captain in the Navy and the son of a surgeon, followed. His primary assignment was to explore the northern regions of the West Africa, walking down from Tripoli, down across Lake Chad and into Borno. Having completed this assignment, he returned to the coast in December 1825 to try and unravel the mystery. He too died in the effort in 1827. It was his assistants on the venture, Richard Lander, a Cornish man, who in 1830 finally succeeded in establishing that the river Niger entered the sea through oil rivers in present-day River State, Nigeria, as the river flows eastwards. Having established that the river ran from the west to southeast and joined the Atlantic Ocean at the Bight of Benin, the drive into the hinterland could begin. The River Niger area was central to the vision of the new empire. And they wrote it somewhere that by the Niger, the whole of Western Africa would be embraced. By the Shari, which I have no doubt will be found navigable to the meridian of 25 degree east longitude, a communication will be opened with all nations inhabiting the unknown countries between the Niger and the Nile. British influence and enterprise would thereby penetrate into the remotest recesses of the country. New and boundless markets will be opened to our manufacturers. A continent teeming with an inexhaustible fertility will yield our riches to our traders. Not merely a nation, but hundreds of nations will be awakened from the lethargy of centuries and become useful and active members of the great commonwealth of mankind. Discovering West Africa for these people was like discovering what they described as the endowment of the commonwealth of mankind. Like to say, you see, all mankind, all of humans alive. God, like to them, they described West Africa as a place that they have everything that God created to give to mankind. And this is going to be, and this is a place, this is a continent with hundreds and hundreds of countries. It simply means people were their own countries. Yoruba was a country. That Igbo land was a country. Everyone there that you have everywhere, even the Hausa land was a country. Oh, okay. 1807, and then the Fulani Uthman Dan Fodio jihadist war, which then makes, instead of them saying they met with the Hausa kings, they said they met with sultans. There were no sultans before 1800. There were no sultans there were no Fulanis in Nigeria before 1800. It was until 1807 when the jihad started. And that's why the explorers, they call themselves explorers. They met with the terrorists who have taken over the northern Nigeria, appointed one of them as an emir and sultan, right? So they wrote it down. They call it, these are the explorers' words. So they said, British influence and enterprise would thereby penetrate into the remotest recesses of the country. And then, the mankind. Now, listen to this. So they said, a Christian, and it's going to be a Christian empire. You know, they are British. They are bringing Christianity. They are already training freed slaves to become evangelists. Samuel Ajayi Crowther. Remember Samuel Ajayi Crowther? There are a lot of us grew up and we were told that Samuel Ajayi Crowther was sold as a slave from Yoruba land, and he was sold. Then when he got to so and so, he was freed. And when they freed him, they took him straight to Sierra Leone, and he was in Sierra Leone. But then he got trained as as an evangelist who brought Christianity to come and help facilitate the colonialism in Nigeria, in today's Nigeria. Ajayi Crowther, we don't even know if that is his name. Samuel Ajayi Crowther. They've written so much history around him because, he came in, they brought in the Bible and all of that stuff. I'll get to that part too. But Samuel Ajayi Crowther, there's no record that he's actually a Yoruba man. But we were raised to believe that he was a Yoruba man. No, he was one of the instruments among many others that were trained to come and preach Christianity to us. But it is not about our salvation, it's to win our souls. They said to win our souls, change our identity, colonize us. And they succeeded. We are still battling with that today. Remember that. We are battling with it today. Now, we would have to know, was Samuel Ajayi Crowther his name? Was that actually his name? Was Samuel Ajayi Crowther a Yoruba man, truly? That's what we were told. But now we know that Sierra Leone was actually the launch pad where they trained other people they call the missionaries. Missionaries this, missionaries that. But let us continue, okay? A Christian empire, okay? To save us, to save our souls, to go to heaven. But the plan wasn't that. The evil people who brought that, they didn't even care about any heaven. They don't give a damn about it because there's nothing like that in their book. But let's continue. A Christian empire. The plan at this stage was to establish a Christian empire through the education of the natives in the way of Christ. It was a carefully considered strategy shaped in part by the lessons of recent history in the unsuccessful attempt to Christianize Native American Indians. Here is that quote on that, okay, said, within the last few years, we have had occasion to review the whole course of our proceedings, and we have come to the conclusion, from a deliberate view of the past, that we erred in the plan which was originally adopted in making civilization, they call it civilization, they said we were backward. They were bringing us civilization. That's what our history said. They said they brought civilization to Africa. Africa was already civilized before these thugs. Of course, they've managed to re-educate us, to think like them, to behave like them. And if you can't behave like them, you are substandard, you are not up to the task, you will be rejected. And for centuries, we have been like that now. Sure you get. Let's continue. So the experience led to a parliamentary committee being set up in 1833 to look into the key question of whether the experience of the several missionary societies led to the belief that it would be advisable to begin with civilization in order to introduce Christianity, or with Christianity in order to now lead to civilization. So they were trying to see which of them will work. Since it didn't work on the West Indies, it did not work on the Indians. So we didn't work on these guys, or which one should go first? So the strategies will have been aided by the publication in 1776, the year that America won its independence from Britain, of Edward Gibson's The Decline and the Fall of the Roman Empire. Gibbon showed how the infusion of Christianity into the citizens of the greatest empire ever known had disengaged them from the pantheon of Roman gods, Apollo, Janus, Mars, and Jupiter, to whom they had hitherto credited their greatness. With this precedent as a guide, there was every confidence that the arrival of the Christianity would have a similar transformative effect upon African traditional societies. The other political calculation in the decision to take the Bible to the people of West Africa was the realization that the rival faith of Islam was pushing down from across the Sahara. The dispatch reports from the explorers of jihad, whose true object was the expansion of Islamic empire, helped to convince the Europeans of the merits of a religious cover for their own imperial advance. To arrest Islam's further southward penetration, Christian settlements were to be established at the southernmost point of the areas which Islam had already reached, to serve as a buffer. So they suspected that the Arabs were already pushing Islam. They are pushing it from the Sahara down south. So one of the idea of the European then was their religion will have to be a cover. We need to use religion. So that's why they went to Calabar. All of you, where they will watch. That was how they entered Calabar. Because Calabar is close to the north from the eastern side. So there is to say, okay, from Calabar straight to Okogi, which is today's Lokoja, to Lokoja. All of this was to establish Christian settlements there. Give them some British protection, okay? And as a buffer, so that will block the advancement of that Islam down south. Strategy, they called it. And in fact, it's a political one. So the work of taking the Bible to West Africa was the responsibility of the Church Missionary Society, CMS. That was their own job. Their job was to take Bible to Africa, to West Africa, while the colonizers are waiting to see the effect of that before they launch the next stage, which later became part of our, lost identity today. CMS, which had been established on the 12th of April, 1799, in anticipation of abolition, with William Wilberforce as its founding vice president. Its original name was the Society for Missions to Africa and East. The mission was to preach the gospel to every creature. Its first task was the education and training of the recaptives as native missionaries. The moral case was to be based on a pressing need to turn the heathens of these lands away from the ways of superstition and away from the practice of human sacrifice, which it was said to spawn. Richard Landon's account of events, which he claims to have observed in Badagry, was sensational beyond the point of credibility, with tales of ritual human sacrifice with smoking blood, like that. So with the home audience being fed report like this, the case for the infusion of Christianity became compelling. Let me explain that. Like I said, you see the idea of burning people and calling them witches, or burning humans or giving human sacrifices for different cult groups. They are never part of African culture. Okay? I know a lot of people have done so much that they have managed to redesign their own history to say, oh, yes, it's true. We used to use human being as a sacrifice here. Or we used to kill human being and hit human being like that. It's not an African culture. Yeah, there might be 1, 2, or 3 cultures here and there whose belief requires using human sacrifice. That is not limited to Africa. The Europeans were doing human sacrifices. Yes. They were those who sacrifice virgins, sacrifice this. You can even see in their own in the Bible that they brought to you, the story of Abraham sacrificing his own son for something that God says he has to sacrifice his son. This is not African, but they have succeeded. They were writing back, all of their explorers, they were writing back to their country, telling them that, oh, they do human sacrifice here. Oh, they are so backward this, they are so backward that. They were actually projecting their way of life on the people. So they now designed their Christianity on that. We are here to stop you from doing superstition. We are here to stop you from following any dark god. We are here to stop you from sacrificing human beings. We are here to stop you from killing twins. We are here this or that. So we are here to liberate you and your soul. Jesus Christ died for you. And all of that stuff. This was all strategy from the word go. Okay? But let's continue. So according to the moral part, so the recaptives. The recaptives are those who believe that they were free, only to end up again in slavery. But this time around, they won't be slaves. They will now be called missionaries, African missionaries. But they are actually the recaptives. Samuel Ajayi Crowther is one of the most celebrated Africans of all times. He was born in 1809. Just 2 years previously, the British Parliament had passed the law making slave trade. Abolition rather. It should be abolishing slave trade. I missed something there. Yeah, passed the law making the slave trade, but not slavery itself, illegal. According to Crowther's own account, he was kidnapped as a young boy and sold into slavery. He had passed through the door of no return, through which the slaves passed before being loaded onto the slave ships on the Lagos coast. When the ship was arrested by a British anti-slavery patrol, if any native was qualified to preach the message of salvation and of life after death, it would be a recaptive, like Ajayi Crowther. Since it is by account of miracles that people are most readily converted to a faith, with the encouragement of the Church Missionary Society, Crowther had documented his own experience in a letter to one Reverend William Jowett on the 22nd of February, 1837. According to them, Samuel Ajayi Crowther, a freed slave, or a rescued slave who experienced miracle, wrote this to a Reverend Father Jowett. The Reverend, and dear sir, as I think it will be interesting to you to know something of the conduct of providence in my being brought to this colony, where I have the happiness to enjoy the privilege of the gospel. I give you a short account of it, hoping I may be excused if I should prove rather tedious in some particulars. I suppose sometimes about the commencement of the year 1821, I was in my native country, enjoying the comfort of father and mother and the affectionate love of brothers and sisters. From this period, I must date the unhappy, for which I am now taught, in other respects, to call blessed day, which I shall never forget in my life. I call it unhappy day because it was the day in which I was violently turned out of my father's